right, we are moving right along. Our next speaker is Dr. Gail Langellotto. She is the professor and extension specialist and master gardener coordinator in horticulture. Her talk is Gentle Pressure, Relentlessly Applied, Building a Culture of DEI in Oregon's Extension Master Gardener Program.
Oh, to follow Gordon Jones. But I will do my best. My first tenure-track position was at Fordham University, which is located in the South Bronx of New York City. I'm an entomologist, and as an entomologist working in New York City, I did not want to work on mosquitoes or roaches. Luckily, I stumbled upon community gardens and the rich complexity that they have as serving as habitat for beneficial insects. At Fordham, my lab group and I studied how community gardens could serve as habitat for garden bees and other beneficial insects, and also how the decisions that gardeners make affect that biodiversity. At the time, we were working on a relatively small set of about 40 gardens, and I just kept thinking to myself how much more progress we could make if only I could directly connect with gardeners. And that's how I ended up at Oregon State University as the lead of the statewide Extension Master Gardener Program. And I have to be honest, when I moved to Oregon, it was a shock to me. Prior to moving here, I had grown up in Baltimore City, went to grad school in Washington, D.C., postdoced in Sacramento, California, and had my first tenure-track position in the South Bronx. I was sincerely confused by what seemed to me a lack of ethnic and cultural diversity unlike any other place that I had ever lived before. So when I saw an advertisement for an Oregon Humanities Project entitled, "Why Are There So Few Black People in Oregon?" presented by the amazing Walida Imarisha, I rushed for a front row seat and I made my entire family go. What I learned at that lecture about Oregon's institutionalized history of exclusion and discrimination sat so heavy in my heart that I was not sure I could stay in the state. About that time, I also started looking at the Master Gardener Program, which is a program that I sincerely love. And I noticed that lack of cultural and ethnic diversity within our volunteer corps. And it wasn't just that Master Gardener volunteers lack diversity because Oregon lacks diversity. When we compared the demographics of our volunteer corps to Oregon Census data, we were significantly out of sync. This also isn't an Oregon-specific problem. Studies have been done of Master Gardener programs in multiple states, and on a nationwide level, Master Gardener volunteers tend to be a relatively homogeneous group of older, white, and affluent gardeners. I first learned about structural barriers to participation and access when I participated in OSU's amazing search advocacy program. And I could easily see how that idea of structural barriers applied to the Master Gardener Program. At about that time, the time required to become a Master Gardener volunteer was an average of 66 hours of classroom time, followed by 66 hours of volunteer service within about a 10-month time period. Costs for registration were as high as $500, and time to travel to and from training sites added additional expense and time. So when we started looking at what we were calling the true cost of being a Master Gardener volunteer, which considered that time has a monetary value, a low-end estimate of the true cost of becoming a Master Gardener volunteer was $3,400. As an extension program, we have an obligation and a mandate to serve all gardeners, and it was obvious that we were not meeting that mandate. Gardening is a multifaceted activity which is accessible across generations and can be approached from a variety of cultural perspectives, as we've already seen here today. We started to take a hard look at our program, and we said we wanted to do better. So first, we addressed those systemic barriers to access and participation. We encouraged individual counties to lower classroom time and volunteer service commitments, and also to lower the amount of their registration fees. Over the course of a few years, the total time required to become a Master Gardener volunteer dropped by 22 hours. That's classroom time plus volunteer service time. And registration fees dropped by a little bit less than $70 across counties. These changes not only made the program more accessible, but they were also in better alignment with best practices for adult informal education. Master Gardener training classes had previously been described as drinking from a fire hose. Who wants to sit in a classroom for 2 3-hour lectures a day, 1 day a week for 11 straight weeks? Certainly not me. And if I'm being honest, I hated those 3-hour lectures. They're very difficult for both the learner and the instructor. But that was just the start. There was so much more to do, and quite honestly, I was petrified of making a mistake and doing more harm than good. Remember, I am an entomologist. I have no background in diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. So I did what any self-respecting academic would do, and I went to the library, and I read as much as I could about research best practices in DEI work within programs, and I thought about how that would apply to the Master Gardener program. I learned that it was normal for the task to feel overwhelming, and that it was thus best to focus on meaningful actions that could move the needle in a positive direction. I wasn't going to solve all problems at once. And this is where the mantra, gentle pressure, relentlessly applied, really helps me to stay focused and to stay in the game, particularly when the work becomes difficult and/or uncomfortable. One of the things that we did is we expanded our gardening classes beyond traditional horticultural offerings to include things such as the contributions of Black garden clubs to horticulture, or the importance of food sovereignty to indigenous tribes, or how climate change disproportionately affects communities that were redlined 80 years ago. And that is because of differential access to gardens and green space. Gardens and green space intersect with DEI issues. We really just had to open our eyes and start to look. These presentations were relatively new for our group. They were by far some of the best attended and most well-received programs we ever offered. We put out a call for volunteers, faculty and staff who were interested in advancing DEI within the Master Gardener program. In our first cohort, we attracted more than 30 individuals from across the state who committed to 1 year of learning and action. This included making sure that they were taking what they learned in our committee and making it come alive within their local program. Some of my favorite stories from this time came from Master Gardeners themselves. A previous president of the Oregon Master Gardener Association called the 1 hour that he spent learning about the contributions of Black garden clubs to horticulture the best hour he had ever spent as a Master Gardener. There was a Jackson County Master Gardener who saw a local commemoration event being advertised for Juneteenth. And he said that he pushed himself out of his comfort zone to attend so that he could learn more. He had an amazing time and committed to bringing more Master Gardener volunteers with them the following year. Another volunteer told me that they caught themselves making an assumption about the gender of someone's spouse. But even that mistake was made easier. They were able to acknowledge their mistake and move on because of the tools that they learned and practiced in our committee. I didn't picture myself doing social justice work as an entomologist. I felt wholly unprepared for what still seems like an overwhelming task. And maybe you're like me. Maybe you're wondering whether or not you're the person to make a difference, or whether or not DEI or social justice matters to livestock production or row crops or viticulture. I'm inviting you to at least open your eyes and try to think about those intersections. Really, the first step is learning so that you're best prepared to move from learning to action when the time presents itself. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable, that's probably a good sign that you're on the right track. Because what we're doing is hard. It amounts to changing the culture of our organization. And if you're like me, I'd never given the culture of my program a second thought. So today, I invite you, if you're not already working in this space, to do one thing, to read one thing, to attend one lecture, to consider signing up for Diversity Champions so that you're able to broaden your perspective, and when you're ready, you can move from learning to action with a commitment and faith that gentle pressure, relentlessly applied, will eventually make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. Master gardeners hold a special place in my heart because that's how I got started in Extension, was as a horticulture agent working with master gardeners in Florida. So
Awesome.
Thank you for your efforts. And we have time for maybe one question.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, Gail. Thank you so much for paving the way and being courageous and showing all of us what real work means and what it looks like. It's not really a question, it's more of a reflection on the fact that I could easily have swapped master gardeners for master naturalists in your talk. And what struck me most was the cost imbalance and the time as cost equation. So you've given me a lot to think about, and yeah, it is overwhelming, and it doesn't seem like little steps matter, but thank you for letting us all know it does.
Thanks, Jason. I'll mention that when we had that high average of 66 hours of classroom time plus 66 hours of volunteer service, at that time the culture of our organization was, you have to show us you're committed, you have to show us you're the best, we only take the best. And so we actually showed that calculation to the Master Gardener volunteers, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's not what we're trying to do. So even like showing it to folks helped them to understand how exclusionary we were being. Oh, and then the other thing that I want to try to say about culture change is Master Gardeners here in Oregon, we have so many wonderful volunteers. The program's been in place for 46, 47 years. We have volunteers that have been volunteering with us for that long. That isn't how people volunteer these days. You should not have to make a 25-year commitment to this organization to access and benefit from its resources. And so we're really having to change the way we welcome and steward volunteers as well. So.